All right, so today we're going to look at, as I mentioned, a couple different little cool things you can do in your select statement. Thing number one is actually, I was just pointing out a second ago, is right here on the screen. I didn't even realize that that was part of the message there. And here's what it is. So let's use the tile database. And we know, like, for example, the customer table. If I select star from customer, we know that the display is kind of messy, it wraps around, and you can deal with that if you want to change the resolution of your command line or whatever, but I like the resolution it's at, and for most tables, you know, like say the rep, it works just fine. But the customer table is a little messy, okay? So there's actually a little trick we can do to make the select display in vertically instead of horizontally, all right? And it has to do with this right here. Now, a semicolon and a slash lowercase g are the exact same thing. So, for example, if I say that, slash lowercase g, that's the same thing as a semicolon, okay? And I still get the table. But if I make it a capital G, we get this. We get a vertical display. So now I can actually see each record one at a time very cleanly and very clearly, and I can see every single piece of data. I don't have to worry about this word wrap business here, okay? So just keep in mind that that slash G, there is no semicolon because that slash G replaces the semicolon. If you do that, any theories on what will happen if I do that? Say again? Yes, but
It's going to get an empty line after the slash.
it's going to run first. The first part will run, and then we'll get an error after. So the slash G part will run just fine, but then at the end it says no query specified because that was essentially two commands, right? It would be the same thing as doing this, right? Two semicolons. We get the query runs, but then we get another semicolon at the end. Because remember, every time you have a semicolon, that's saying the line is over. This is a new line, a new command. So it's expecting some other command right here, right? Something like that. And then we just get both queries. So if I just have an extra semicolon at the end of the line there, that's the same thing as just putting a semicolon on the line right there, right? Gives me that error. So, does that make sense? So slash G, no semicolon. So if on a homework question or a test or something like that, I'm asking about this display, make sure that you don't have a semicolon at the end of on your answer. Because I've had a lot of people that on previous questions like that, I don't know if I have one to be honest this semester because I changed the curriculum quite a bit, but if I do have it, in the past, people would put this as an answer and their argument would be, yeah, but I ran it and it worked. Well, it worked, but it followed by an error, right? So that is incorrect. All right, anyway, that's the proper one right there. Okay, any questions about that? It's pretty straightforward. Okay, next up, this is something that's actually not in the book. So, you're getting extras because I care a lot about you guys. All right, the next thing we're going to look at is a very cool, if you're familiar with programming and you know what a switch statement is, it's kind of like a switch statement, okay? That you can write right into your query. So this one, we're going to use the text editor because it'll be a little bit easier to type this up. All right, so temp.sql, there you go. All right, so let's start off just with a simple thing here. I'm going to show you a cool little trick that we can do using a built-in SQL function. And the function is called day of week, all right? So let's take a look at, the Colonial database, I believe is the one I'm looking for. Select star from guide. Yeah, it has the hire date in there. It to be capital G, there we go. So right here we have the hire date. So there's a function we can use that instead of showing the date, it will actually return the day of the week, okay? Do you have a question? Sorry.
Yeah, so do you know, like in Linux, when you don't have to scroll up and down, how would you show this where you can use like the space bar to go to the next line or something like that?
If you're doing, well, Yeah, if you're in Linux, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure how you would be able to do scrolling like that in Linux. I have to look. It's been a while since I've used MySQL on a Linux box. You might be able to get away with using the pipe more on a Linux machine. I know you can do that on the Linux command line for sure, but I don't know if you can do that in the MySQL while you're in MySQL. It's a good question. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. Sorry. So what he's talking about on a Linux machine, if you're purely on the command line, you don't have this option to scroll. We're scrolling because we have a window here. And so there is a command in Linux called more, which this will not work here, but I'm just going to show you what it will look like. You put the pipe symbol and then the word more. And that what it'll do, this will give me an error, but what it would do on a Linux machine is it would scroll whatever can fit on one screen and then wait for you to hit the space bar or enter to continue scrolling. And so it wouldn't scroll the whole thing off the screen like that. So that may work on a Linux version of MySQL, but I don't know, and my guess is probably not. So that's a good question. I'm not sure the answer. Sorry. If you remind me, maybe shoot me an email. I'll do some digging, see if I can find a better answer for you. Okay, so what were we talking? Oh yeah, hire date. So what we can do here, this function called day of week. So I could say select hire date from guide, right? We know how to do this. And it lists all the hire dates, okay? But what if I wanted, instead of the date, I wanted to return the day of the week that is? Well, I can put the hire date in a function, okay? And so the function is called day of week, like that. And now we'll actually return the day of the week as a number. Number 1 is Sunday, number 2 is Monday, and so forth, okay? So that means that these 4 people here were hired on a Sunday. These guys were hired on a Monday. This one was hired on a Friday, and that was a Monday. All right, so I'll show you why this is useful in just a minute. But that function, I can do that on the command line any given day. If I wanted to know what day of the week it was, day of week, I can just put any random date I want in there. 1977 dash, here, let's do my birthday. See what day of the week I was born. Sorry, missed the quotes there. Five, that's a Thursday if I'm not mistaken. So I was born on a Thursday, there you go. So you can pass in any date you want though into that function, okay? All right, so why is that useful? The reason this is useful is because we can actually convert that into an actual word, right? Now that's what I'm going to show you right here. So let's do select guide num. What are the other fields? Last name, first name. I'm going to put these on their own line, makes it a little cleaner for me to read. Next up, I'm going to do a case statement, okay? This is like a switch statement. So what this means is I'm going to say case and then hire date. So what I'm saying here is look at the hire date, and when it's a certain value, do the following. So when 1, then Sunday. That makes sense? So I'm saying for the case of the hire date, if it's a 1, you're going to print out a Sunday rather than a 1, okay? All right, so here's case 2, case 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, okay? So that's the case statement. The case statement is saying, take the case of hire date, and if its value is, and actually, what's wrong with that statement?
Hire date's just gonna pull the date.
Yeah. So I should be saying day of week. There we go. So take the case of day of week hire date, which is going to return a 1 through 7. Take that case If it's a 1, do Sunday. If it's a 2, say Monday, and so forth. And then when all is said and done, we say end. Okay? So that blocks the case statement. Also, we want to give that an alias. Why?
Because it's gonna say day of week, hire date.
Yeah, because if we don't give it an alias, that the display or the label for that field will be this whole mess right here. Okay, and I'll show you what that looks like after we do it we'll do it the correct way first. So I'm just going to say end, then we'll say as hire day. Okay? From guide. Assuming I don't have any typos and syntax errors, this should give us what we're looking for. And there it does, right? So it gives us their number, their last name, and their first name, just as I said here. Guide num, last name, first name, right here. And then the next thing, this whole big messy case statement right here, gives us this output right here. It says Sunday or Monday or Friday or whatever day of the week it is, and we labeled it as hire day, and that's why we have that right there, okay? So any questions about that basic idea? Feeling okay about that? All right, let me show you what would happen if we didn't give it an alias. Let's put my semicolon on there. We get this because that would be the name of that field. So let's look at this output here. See how there's that little divider here, right? This little pipe symbol right there. So you have the name, or the num, pipe, last name, pipe, first name, pipe, hire date. Well, we still have that, right? There's num, pipe, last name, pipe, first name, pipe, and then this whole messy name, and then the end pipe. So it's just too big and bulky, and it makes your output look kind of crappy. So that's why we want to give it an alias, okay? Also, what happens if the value is something other than 1 through 7? In this particular case, that's impossible, because that query can only return one of those 7 values, okay? But what if it's something else? Well, we can actually do, let's just say, let's leave off 6 and 7, okay? And let's just say that we decided, for whatever reason, to only put those. We can actually do an else. So when it's 1, do this. When it's 2, do that. When it's 3, do that. When it's 4, do that. When it's 5, do that. Else, do this. Unknown day, or something like that. Okay? So if I run that, anytime we get a 6 or a 7, which is a Friday and a Saturday, it's going to say unknown day. And so that must have been a Friday or a Saturday. Okay? All right, how do we feel about that basic idea? It's recorded here, so if you need to go back and look, you can. But do you have any questions about it? Question, Josh? Oh, just scratching. Yawning, stretching, trying to come alive. Anybody know that song? Really? 9 to 5 by Dolly Parton? Come on. There's one other thing I want to show you regarding this, and it's slipping my mind at the moment. Oh, yeah, I remember. So the reason I show you this is because, well, let me ask you guys, can you see a use case for this? Something a little bit more useful than figuring out the day of the week somebody was hired. Can you guys think of a useful use for this? I'll tell you one that I use it for all the time, but I want to hear your thoughts first. Say again? Right, right. It would be for a report for sure, but specifically what? What kind of report? Anyone? Bueller? All right, I'll tell you what I use it for. What I use it for was to figure out, we would run a report to figure out what day of the week is our most productive sales day, I should say. So it was most of the stuff that we did, our sales were online. So we were trying to figure out, when did people buy? Did they buy on Sundays? Did they buy on Mondays? Did they buy on Tuesdays? What was the most common day? Was it on the weekend? Was it during the weekday? Was it at night? Was it in the morning? And so one of the reports, imagine if this were sales day instead of hire day, okay? So then I would know, oh, the majority of these sales came in on a Sunday, or maybe they came in on a Monday, it looks like, okay? So this was a very useful tool. Now, I'm going to write another query here that you don't need to worry about. I'm going to teach you how to do it later, but I'm going to show you how to make this data a little bit more useful, okay? So what I would do is I would take this part here, and I would get just the day of the week first, all right? So now, whoops, Now this is just showing, and let me put the 6 and 7 back in there. Okay. So now this is just showing every day that a sale was ever made. Imagine this with thousands and hundreds of thousands of records, right? So I'd have this big old list of just 7 unique fields, 7 unique values, Sunday through Saturday. But I'd have hundreds of thousands of them, right? So wouldn't it make sense to kind of group them and count them, right? So we're going to learn how to do that later, but let me show you what that might look like. So I'd start off with the day of the week, and then I would count that, and then I would actually group it. Group by hire day. Okay? What that gives me now is a summary. 1 was on Friday, 5 were on Monday, 4 were on Sunday. Now, again, if this were hundreds of thousands of records, this would be a nice summary of when the majority of the sales were run. Additionally, the way I made the report was that I would have the boss or whoever would have a dashboard that they could go in and put a date range. So they would run this report with a date range. So for example, again, let's imagine this isn't hire date, but that it's sales date, okay? So here's what that would look like. Where hire, and it gives this would be sales, right? Sales date is between, 2001, 01, and 2018, 12/31, right? So I'm only running this date range so that I'll actually get some real data in there. But normally it would be, something like this, right? It would be that whole year. And the way the interface would be built, it would allow them to just click on a little calendar thing that they could choose the date range, right? And then I would have my code link up to the SQL, and it would put this in the query. So it would be something like this, but we're going to put 18 so we can get some real data here. And it would, again, show this count for that date range, okay? So that's a real world use case for that. That's why I wanted to bring it up, because it is something that I've used a lot, and I had several reports that were based on that. Another thing is sometimes we want to know just what hour is the most appealing. So it doesn't matter the day, but we want to know what time of day, any given day. So I would run a report that would show that these people bought in the 12 o'clock hour, the 1 o'clock hour, the 2 o'clock, and this AM or PM or whatever. And there's functions that can help you pull that data out combined with this case statement, and you can have a pretty robust query that gives you all the data you need. Okay? Any questions about that? All right. Let's go back into our thing here. And I think we're good with that. Yeah, I think we're okay there. All right, let's look at auto incrementing. All right, so we're going to move away from the select query for just a minute. We're going to dive into table structure again, right? And so let's go back to the TAL database. And if we look at describe rep, we see that the rep table, the char to rep num is a primary key. Okay, I'm going to change that to not be a char, all right? Now, I don't want you guys to do this because it'll screw up all of your hard work that you just did to make these tables correctly, okay? So don't change this. If you want to take notes on how I'm doing it, that's fine, but I would recommend you don't change this because I'm going to screw up my tables here on purpose. All right, so here's how this goes. I'm going to alter the table just like normal, alter table rep, and then I'm going to modify column called rep num. And normally whenever we modify the column, we always bring along with it the data type, right? We've talked about that. Well, this time the data type is an int, okay? And so let's just leave it there. We'll pause there for a minute, all right? So now if I do a describe table, you'll see that it's an integer, not a char, okay? But it's not auto incrementing just yet. Let's make it auto increment. So I can actually alter table rep, and then I believe modify, sorry, got a little brain cramp there, rep num. We could have done this all in one line, but I wanted to show you in baby steps. Okay, int, and then we're gonna go auto, int, hello, increment. Okay, and now if I look, notice this little extra thing, it says auto increment. Okay, so why is that useful? Well, here's why. If I do an insert into the rep table, in the past I would have to put rep num right here, right? And then I would say values and then give it some number. I'd have to fill in the other fields too, but doing that was me choosing the number. Well, there's a problem with me choosing the number. What if the number I want to choose is already taken? I have to go look through the table and find out what numbers are not used and pick a number. That makes no sense. So now, I don't have to mention the rep number. I can say last name, for example, first name. Let's say that's all the data we have for now. Values, and we'll say Jones for last name, Beavis for first name. And now this will not only insert that record, but it'll also automatically create a primary key value for us. It auto increments it. So if I now say select star from rep, you'll notice there's Beavis Jones and it gave him the number of 61 automatically. Okay, does that make sense? All right, any questions? Yeah, sorry.
Can you auto increment it by 15 or 5?
Yeah, the question was, can you auto increment by a certain number? Before I answer that, my question to you is, why would you want to do that?
Oh, I just asked because on the red num, it auto increments by 15.
It actually doesn't auto increment by 15. Right, that wasn't auto incrementing, that's values we manually put in there, right?
Okay.
Right, it's not auto incrementing.
If you want to make it auto increment by 15.
Right, but my question again is, why would you want to do that?
Just, I don't know, there's no reason, really, I just wanted to ask.
That's fine. The answer is, I believe there's a way, but I've never wanted to do that. And I'm not 100% sure how to do it. But there is a way. If there is a way, I would never use it. Because, for one, if that's an integer, that field is an integer value, and integers can hold a pretty big number, obviously, like, billion something or whatever. But my preference is it starts at 1 and it just works its way up. And so you can fit as many numbers as possible in there. Because if you start incrementing by something other than 1, then you can max out. Not with an integer, probably never. I mean, that's because that means your primary key can be 9 digits long or whatever. So you're probably never going to hit that limit. But the preference is just 1 at a time, right? Yeah.
On that same note, like, what if you were having, like, you're doing like employee numbers and you want it to be a 7-digit number, but you don't want it to have like all zeros, all ones, or something like that?
Yeah. So you don't want to have all zeros?
Or all ones, like not a consistent number, be like somewhat random.
Oh, you want the primary key to be random. Again, I'm not sure why you would want that.
Just so like when you have an employee, you don't have them be their employee number be like all ones or something like that.
Why would that be bad, though?
I don't know, I be particularly bad, but it would just be their employee number.
Well, that's pretty normal. I mean, because that in all the tables I've ever made, the employee number was auto incremented. Somebody out there has an employee number of 666. You know what I mean? It just happens that way. So the whole point of auto increment is just what it sounds like, to automatically increment a number, not to create a random number. Now, you can write any code you want to randomly generate a number, and to you can do whatever you want with that. But if you want it to just automatically happen, then just incrementing by 1 is what you're going to get, basically. Now, you can start at a higher number if you want, right? You can start at 1,000, and that can be useful, for example, with like your orders table. You don't want somebody to have order number 1, or like the first 15 or 20 customers, their order number is 1 through 15 or whatever. Because think about that, you go to buy a product from a company and your order number is 1. Like, oh, these guys have never sold anything to anybody ever before, right? So that looks a little weird. So you can actually set it up to start somewhere else. And the way you do that, so let's alter table rep, and then auto increment equals 1,000. Oh, why? Because I spelled it wrong, that's why. There we go. Okay. All right, so now if I do another insert here, so let's insert Beavis 2 and do a select from rep. He's now 1,000. And the next one will be 1,001 and 1,002 and so on and so forth. So that way, if you did want to force your employee numbers to be at least 4 digits, you can go with that, yeah.
Yeah, and then is there a max, like, can you set a max number too as well?
The max number is set by the data type, which is an integer, which,
And if it hits the max data type and you deleted a record, would it reuse the?
no. So first of all, keep in mind that the max for an integer is 4 billion. That's a big number. You'd have to have a 9-digit, employee number. So if you have 4 billion employees or 4 billion sales or whatever, then you may want to consider looking at a different way of managing it. In that case, those types of scenarios, it may be useful to have a combined, maybe a char primary key. Problem is then you have to manually do that, right? But you could have a char primary key that has a combination of letters and numbers, so you can have way more combinations with fewer digits, right? So there's lots of different things like that, but generally speaking, every single database I've ever written that has a primary, every table I should say, and it will have a primary key, I've just used auto incrementing starting at 1, with the exception of orders. I start those at 1,000 usually, every time. And I've never ever run into any kind of a limitation like that, ever. Now, it doesn't mean that won't happen, doesn't mean it can't happen. But if you'd never ever want to reuse a primary key, right? Any thoughts on why that would be? Why you would not want to reuse a primary key?
Well, the definition of it is unique.
Yeah. So if we had a record that we deleted, so let's say we deleted a customer. First thing I'd ask you is why you're deleting customers, right? But let's say you deleted a customer and their number was 15, okay? Then later we create a new customer and we give them the old 15. Well, now any reports in other tables that have a reference to the number 15, like for example, the customer table, the customer table has a reference to rep number 15, right? Well, if I'm going to delete the rep whose name is 15, number is 15, then I need to go to every single table also that refers to that 15, which that's a pain in the butt, and that's just bad form. And now we lose all history of that employee ever. So the problem with that is if this were some sort of a report, maybe the order table, for example, if we look at orders, select star from orders. And again, imagine that this table is hundreds of thousands of records. We have a customer number 126. Well, let's say we delete customer number 126. We get a new customer. We give him the number 126. Well, now it'll look like this new 126 ordered this old 126's order, but that's not what happened. It looks, our data gets all screwed up. So deleting records is a rare thing. Typically, the only time I ever delete a record is if while entering it, I screw it up, and it's easier to delete the record and re-enter it than it is to edit it, which is rare. The only other time is I'll occasionally will make like a temporary table where I'll dump some data into it and do some manipulation of it and then extract some information from that. And then when I'm all done, I'll delete the records in that table, because every time I use it, I just put new clean data in it and then I delete it and keep reusing it. But it's never a permanent thing. It's very, very rare to delete a record from a permanent table. Okay? These are all great questions. Yeah, Jesse?
So in my company, I know if we have a customer and like they can't get into their old account, we basically just have to create them a new one and mark their old account as a duplicate.
Yeah.
And so there's still record of it. Will eventually that cause a problem in the database?
So that can, and what you can do is you can merge two records. So the question, so for the recording, the question was, what if I have an old customer that can't get into their account, and so we make them a new account and we mark the original one as duplicate? That you'd have to set up your database so that it knows how to handle that. Because if the old one has records and reports and things tied to it, then you need to be able to query both of those. And you can, if you can see the old record in the database, my first question would be, why can't the customer access it?
Oh, just for, like, I deal with medical information, so if they don't get their address right, if they can't tell me their phone number and old email address, then I can't.
Okay,
get there.
so there's nothing wrong with their ability to access it, it's just they have the wrong credentials, and because it's medical stuff, you can't just give it out to them. That makes sense. So how do you know the other record's a duplicate?
Well, there's that way, and then also if a customer, so if they already have an existing account, and they try to make a new account online or something, and they'll make a new account online and then place an order with that new account, and so now we have two accounts for them, but
Yeah.
the way I know that it's duplicate is if there's like an order from 2012 on there, and then we're gonna make them a new account, and it's like 2019, I could pretty much tell from their old information, just from specific parts, and I can mark it as duplicate.
Okay, so in that scenario, if you have an old account that's a duplicate and you have a new one that you're making for them, that would be a scenario where I would leave the old account there and you have some sort of flag that says duplicate. And then I would, any notes or anything related to that, I would copy into the new account, the new record, if you have a notes field or something like that. I would also put a note in there saying that the old one is this ID, this is the old account. And then, this is where being the database expert comes in handy. You as the database person would have to know all the tables that have that customer number as a foreign key. So, for example, I would run an update query here that says, so let's just do it. So let's take 126. Let's say that's the original one, and we've now created a new account for these guys, and their new number is 999. So I would do update orders set customer num equal to 999, where customer num equals 126. Now, running that query will change every record that has a 126 to a 999, which will link all their old purchases to their new account, right? So now I do that, and I look in there, and now that's the new ID. And if I were to open up this record in my front-end interface or whatever, it would still say, you know, here's their old record, and so I could see any old information or whatever. But generally the idea is this: everything from the old record, you put it in the new one. So copy their address and their old address, because you don't want to lose that information.
Yeah, we don't even have a flag, we just mark duplicate, like in notes.
Yeah.
Duplicate, please use this account.
Yeah, that's the right idea, yeah. But generally speaking, the idea would be copy all the data into the new account, and then you'd run an update query. And this is one where you'd have to, and I got emails like this all the time. Hey, can you merge these accounts? And what merge means is do that query I just ran. And I'd have to do that probably on multiple tables, because any other table that uses the customer number in it, I'd have to do that. The only table I wouldn't do it on is the customer table, right? I don't want to overwrite the 126 in the customer record to the new 999. There's going to be two records for them. Good question. Other questions? All right, we'll do it on time here. Oops. All right, we're good. Okay, so if there are no questions about the auto increment, let me first of all reset my database so I have a good working copy here.
Are you gonna give us, didn't you say you're gonna give us?
I will be giving you that file once everybody's turned in the assignment, then I'll give them this file. Yeah. Okay, so now that my database is cleaned up, let's take a look at ordering data, sorting data, okay? So I'm gonna clear this query out. I'll leave it on the screen for just a second here, long enough for, you could pause the video at this point and you won't have to hurry and try to pause it quickly. Okay, so here we go, deleting. All right, so let's start with Select star from rep, right? Let's just start there. I'll use Cal. All right, notice the order that this is in. It's just in the sales rep order, okay? Or, sorry, the rep number order, I should say, okay? So what if I wanted to sort by last name? That's a reasonable thing to want to be able to do, right? It's simply use the order by clause. Order by by last name. Like that. That's it. Now, look at the query, and you'll notice it's slightly different order. Before it was 15, 30, 45, 60. Now it's 15, 30, 60, 45, which means these two are already alphabetical, but these two were not. So now they are. Okay? All right, what if I wanted to order by, let's say, commission rate? So if I want to order by commission rate, it's just called rate there. Then I can say order by rate, and now it's putting all the .06s together, all the .08s together. But what if I wanted to order by rate and last name, right? I wanted to see who all of this, and again, imagine a company where you have hundreds of employees or something like that, but I wanted to order by the rate and then order by the last name. So I can actually do that by simply saying rate, order by rate, comma, last name. So now you'll see there's a slight difference, right? We have all the 06s here, and it's Campos, Tian, and Sefton. Now it's all the 6s here, but it's Campos, Sefton, Tian, okay? So it's ordered by this, then by the last name, okay? That's a pretty common thing, right? Sort by last name and then first name following that. In case you have multiple people with the last name of Smith or whatever, you want to sort by first name afterwards. Okay, so far so good? Now, what if I wanted to find all the highest paid employees first? So I want to sort by rate descending, right? So I can do that by typing in the keyword DESC, short for descending. So now it'll put the .8s at the top and the .6s at the bottom. So now the .8s are here, .6s are here, and it's still alphabetical by name after you get the rate. And right now, it's alphabetical ascending. The default is ascending, right? The default is ascending. So this one I specifically said, no, do that one descending, but this one is still ascending, okay? I could change it if I wanted to, right? Now we'd get a little bit different results, okay? And in this scenario now, we still have it's descending by rate, and now the .06s are in a slightly different order. They're in descending order, okay? So the basic idea is you can sort by whatever fields you want, just separate them by commas, and it's called order by, that's the clause. And in fact, let's go ahead and clean this up so they're each on their own line there, okay? Order by rate descending, last name descending. All right, now, let me show you this. I'm just gonna order by rate. Okay, order by rate, and then I'm going to do order by rate ascending. That's the same thing, okay? They're exactly the same thing. The default is ascending, so doing this, you'll notice there's no difference. You get the exact same output, okay? Because this query that says ascending and this query that just says rate, they're the same thing, okay? Make sense? All right. Next up, I'm going to show you a little trick on how to limit the results. Maybe you just want to look at, let's go to the customer table, from customer, and we're going to do customer num, customer, clearing this up a little bit, customer name, balance, and we'll leave it at, actually, yeah, balance is good. Okay, so let's start there. So this is showing me everybody who owes me money. Now, I want to know who owes me the most money, right? So I'm going to order it by balance. If I want to know who has the most money, how would I do it? Descending, right? At the very top of the list will be the most. So now it's in order of who owes me the most to who owes me the least. And maybe all I really want to worry about are the top 5 people who owe me the most money. So I can actually do a limit clause where I say limit 5. And that will just show the top 5 records based on that query. So now I'm just showing the top 5 people that owe me money. And why would that be useful? Well, they owe us the most money, so let's work on them first. If I can't get a hold of them, we'll look at maybe the next 5. But let's start there because that can give us the most bang for our buck and the most amount, most money for the amount of time spent. Okay, so I can limit however many I want. I can limit to just the one guy, all right, the top one. Okay, and this can be useful where you can again set up on the front end, which we're not learning front end stuff here, but set up on the front end a little interface that lets them choose how many records to display. Display 10, display 100, display them all, display 1, all right? So that's the basic idea of the limit clause. I'm going to show you a cool little trick. We can do with that in a minute. But are there any questions about that idea? Okay.
Can you do a range with that?
A range?
Yes.
Tell me what you mean by that.
You just don't want the top 5, you want somewhere in between, like maybe from 2 to 5 or something like that.
Oh, I see what you mean. No, it's only going to give you the top one. Now, if you wanted to say, give me all the people that owe me a range of this money, you could do that. Sure. So let's take a look here. Like, let's say I wanted anybody that owes me between $500 and $2,000 or something like that. So I could say from customer where balance is between 500 and 2,000, right? And I can do the top 4 or something like that. So now that gives me just anybody that owes me in that range, right? So that gave me basically, these few people right in here, right? Something like that. Okay? To answer your question? Yeah, all right. Okay, last one I'm going to show you is you can actually order randomly with another SQL function called order by rand. I'm going to ignore the limit for just a minute. Okay, so if I do this, notice the order right now, the 575 is at the top. If we do it again, oh, sorry. I need to paste that in there. Now if I do it again, 678's at the top. I do it again, 1210's at the top, right? It's a random order every time. That seems a little bit useless, right? Why would you want a random order? Any thoughts on why?
Random selection, just
Yeah. So I use this all the time on my own personal database to give away prizes. I have a random drawing every month, right? And when I give away a prize, I just, free magic video or something like that, I just do this. Limit 1, get off there. And now, and of course I don't need this other stuff, I don't need the balance or any of that, so I just want, customer name or something like that, or their email address or whatever. So this is all I'm looking for. Right? So now, today Almonton won. Tomorrow Grove Historical Museum won. Next day Brookings Direct won, right? Brookings Direct, hey, 2 in a row. Crest Store, right? So on and so forth. Every time Johnson's, we're cheating. Okay? So, yeah, Jesse.
is it more professional to do random in your code or do random in the database? Like how you did there?
Is it more professional? What do you mean by more professional?
Is there a preferred way?
No? Well, yes, in the sense that, so yeah, I would say there's a preferred way. And that anything you can do in the database itself is probably better because it's happening on the server in the database, and most of your applications are going to be running across the internet. And so you're better off doing all of the stuff in the database directly, yeah. For me, it's a raw query like this. I just go into my database manually and I just say, okay, who's the winner this month? And bam, Toys Galore won this month. There's no code or anything, I just run that query, yeah.
Does the rand have a seeding value?
I don't know. The question is, does it have a seed value? And I don't know if it does or not. I've never tried to use it that way. The answer to that question, since this is a hybrid class, I can play this card. Look it up in MySQL documentation. I don't know. I got asked that same question in the last class and I didn't look it up. Yeah. Question? Well, you say needs one, but if it did, I wouldn't be able to run that the way it is. So it probably already has some way of seeding it. A lot of times, built-in functions like this, the seed is like a timestamp or the current number of seconds of the hour or something like that. And so I don't know if you can manually see that or not. I've never tried it, but I would say look up the MySQL documentation on that one. All right. Sorry, there were 2 questions I didn't have answers to today. I apologize, guys. If you send me an email reminding me that through Canvas, I'll look it up and see if I can get some information on it. Okay, other questions? All right, folks. See y'all Wednesday.